Welcome to On the Couch, the podcast where real conversations meet real change. Pull up a seat, get comfortable, and join us as we dive deep into the conversations that matter most to Black and Brown communities. Hosted by Dr. Diamond and an incredible lineup of co-hosts, On the Couch brings you raw, insightful, and empowering discussions, from mental health and wellness to entrepreneurship, life insurance, healthcare, and everything in between. Our mission is simple: to educate, uplift, and create space for conversations that need to be heard. Whether you're here for practical advice, motivation, or just a dose of inspiration, you've come to the right place. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about the things that shape our lives, our futures, and our communities. This is On the Couch, where we keep it real, keep it relevant, and keep it moving. Let's get started.
Well, good Saturday morning and welcome to On the Couch. Thank you for joining us today. We are looking forward to talking to Stephanie Strickland today, and we are so thankful that she joined us here on the couch. Now, we're going to give you a little bit of a background, but before I do that, I'm going to bring on my co-host here. I got Mark Lee waiting in the wings, and I got a special co-host that has joined us today, Dean Geronimo. So I'm going to bring these two guys on today, and we are going to get our day started. How you guys doing this morning? Welcome, 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 especially you, Dean. Welcome to the show. Thank you for jumping on this morning. How you guys doing?
Doing all right, doing well over here. So, Dean, I know you said y'all are going to have homecoming activities over there in Virginia, but they started that here in Durham, so they had the homecoming parade. I didn't get a chance to go to it because I'm over at the Cultural Arts Center where we're going to have poetry later on this evening, and then they'll have the Durham Symphony performing on tomorrow. So they're going to do a lot of.
It's homecoming season, so I'll be down there at what we call the land of Troy, Virginia State University, celebrating 30 years of graduation from the school at the Hill. So ready to go down there, but take it slow because older me can't do those same things that younger me used to do.
I hear that. We are seasoned now. So, we are in our early 50s. So it's not like we are older, but I hear what you're talking about, how you can.
You know what? You can get away with that one because, see, somebody will look at you and say, seasoned? No, they look at me. They already see heavily seasoned. It doesn't grow at the top anymore, just on the side. So, it's a little different, right?
I hear that. So you know what? We have, again, Stephanie waiting in the wings, and I want to bring her on, right? Because I want to hear about her story, her journey, and where she's going. So what I am going to do, though, is I'm going to talk a little bit about her background here that she sent over to me. So again, Stephanie Strickland, an author, writer, and a speaker. So she is a Dallas, Texas native and an up-and-coming author and a sought-out-after speaker. Stephanie is a survivor of domestic violence who passionately spends her time advocating for victims and survivors of abuse. When she is not busy writing award-winning books and appearing on podcasts, she is sharing her inspiring story with others at speaking events. Stephanie believes that by openly sharing her life, removing her mask, and walking in her truth, she is teaching women you don't have to live in the shame of your past. Through her encouraging words, Stephanie is showing us how to overcome our insecurities, our fears, and seek the life God has promised us. She continuously demonstrates how living a life with self-acceptance, patience, and faith can lead to a life that is thriving and fulfilling. So without further ado, we are going to bring Stephanie Strickland on. We are so excited about speaking to her about even being a survivor of domestic violence, because this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So again, without further ado, let's bring her on. Good morning, Stephanie. How you doing? Thank you for joining us here on the couch. How's
Good
everything
morning.
down there in Texas?
I am grateful to be here. In Texas, y'all, it's still hot. So we're still walking around in our shorts and we still have our AC going. So it's still hot in October in Texas.
Lucky you. I'm telling you, because we are experiencing what, John, like 30s and 40s in the morning.
You know what? It's like 62 degrees here now, and you just wanted to rub it in, right?
We're hoping that it cools off soon. We're like, okay, when is it going to start cooling off? Because even yesterday it was still in the 90s. So
you can borrow from our cold if you want. Balance it out. We get to about 75 all the way across the country. We'll be good.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So, Stephanie, tell us about you. I know I gave a little glimpse about your background, but we would love to hear about you. Who are you?
I am a survivor of domestic violence. I am a Christian. I am a believer. I am a woman who fiercely tries to live my life openly. Without the mask, and I try to be vulnerable, and I try to, when women come to me or when people talk to me, I try to just be who I am so that they get the real version of me. This is who I am all the time, 24/7.
So this is who you are all the time, that open book.
I try to be all the time.
Yeah, and that's really important, because when there is transparency, it is so easy to talk to a person that is willing to share in a teaching way. And like you said, your faith actually, and I can't speak for you, but what did your faith do for you as you went through this period in your life? And I know that we're going to address that period in your life, but how did your faith pull you through out of that, the situation of being a survivor of domestic violence?
Well, I grew up in the church, but you know how that happens when you become adult. You kind of stray away from it. You kind of lose focus on it. But I would say in my 40s, I started going back to church, and I started rebuilding my relationship with God. And that played a big part in me leaving my abusive relationship. That played a big part in it, because I started to see myself the way that God saw me and not the way that the world saw me. And so that played a very big part. My faith, even now, plays a big part in certain things that I do, and certain places that I will speak at, and certain events that I will go to or attend. I pray about everything before I do it to make sure that I'm in alignment with what God has me doing.
And that is important. So you're hearing your mission, you are listening, your prayer is keeping you spiritually grounded and connected to God as you move forward. That's what I'm hearing you say. So tell us about your background. So how you talked about survivor. So tell us about your narrative before you became that survivor.
Okay, so let me start with a little bit of my background. At the age of 14, I had my first son. So I'm a teenage mother. By the time I was 17, I had my second son. This is all with the same man. And when I was 18, my ex-husband joined the military and we got married. And so we were both young, both coming from single parent homes. And even before we were married, there was abuse in the relationship. But like I said, being young, I didn't realize that what I was in was an abusive relationship. I just figured that this is what people did. And so at 18, we got married. My ex-husband was military. We immediately moved to California, where he was stationed. And so here we are, these two 18-year-olds with two kids out in California, learning life. And like I said, the abuse started early in the relationship. And so it just continued on in the relationship. And before I knew it, I had become a woman who was, I learned very quickly how to keep the peace in the house, is what I want to say. I learned very quickly what his triggers were and what set him off. And I learned very quickly how to keep those triggers from happening. Before I knew it, I was in my 40s, 26 years had passed, and I was still in this marriage where I didn't have a voice, where I was afraid to speak up, where I was just basically a shell of a woman. My ex-husband
How you
was a
doing?
drinker, so when he would drink, his whole persona would change. In my book, I talk about it. We called his alter ego Butch. So when Butch would show up, we didn't know, I didn't know, or nobody in the house knew what to expect. And the abuse was mainly towards me. I was always the cause of the reasoning behind everything that was going on. There was the physical abuse, but the verbal, the mental, and the psychological abuse, I would say, was worse than the physical abuse. There was also the sexual abuse and the financial abuse. But like I said, being young and not knowing, I felt like this was all a part of what relationships were all about. And so I was determined to make my marriage work. I was determined to, I don't know my father. I never knew my dad. I wanted my kids to know their dad. And I thought a part of that was me staying in the relationship.
Hey, Ms. Strickland, just really quickly, you talked about the financial abuse, and a lot of times people don't think about that aspect of it and everything. So, just out of curiosity and everything like that, how have you been able to cope with that financial abuse, and when did you recognize that it was financial abuse? And also, could you talk a little bit about the emotional abuse as well?
Okay, so I really didn't realize it was financial abuse until I left. Like I said, my ex-husband was the sole provider in the house. His income was the main income in the house. I did work, but my job was not enough to take care of a household. And so he controlled us that way. He knew that he made the money. He knew that he was the provider. He knew that I wouldn't leave because who was going to provide for us? Who was going to take care of us? Here we are living in in California away from family. So who was going to provide if I left? I didn't feel like I could go back to Texas. I didn't feel like I could come back home. And so the financial abuse stayed for a long time in our marriage, even into our 40s when I left, because he was still the main provider. Yes, I had jobs, but like I said, my jobs were not, I didn't feel my jobs were enough to financially take care of us if I left. The emotional abuse was very subtle. It would start off with, you know, he would talk about the way I dressed or the way, or he knew things about my past. My relationships with my mom was not a healthy relationship. And so he would throw those things in there to tell me how no one loved me and how unworthy I was and how, I should be lucky and grateful that he chose to marry me. These are things that he would say to me. And being young at the time, you cling to or you believe what people say to you. And it kind of formed what we call a trauma bond, which I didn't know at the time that's what it was. I depended on him to tell me who I was and my worth.
So you depended on him and he told you your worth pretty much. Like
Pretty much.
I heard you say too, which is probably absolutely scary about the fact that alter ego that you had to work around. And not only you, but your children too. What was that like for your children to have to, work around that alter ego that you were talking about?
Well, I can't really speak for my children, but I noticed
Right.
when he was in the home, we were kind of like walking on eggshells.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was kind of, quiet. We kind of stayed to ourselves. We were kind of afraid to speak up and, say things. Whereas when he would leave, because he was Navy, so when he would leave, he would be gone for like a few months at a time. The vibe in the house would be totally different. There would be laughter. We would be having fun. We would be talking and joking around with each other. Whereas when he was around, we were very conscious of what we said and what we did.
Wow, that can be really tough, for you, for your children. But you see, but talking about the shift in the home, how scary could that be? Because it's like, did you feel like when you felt his presence at the door, did you know, we're gonna have to shift how
Well,
happiness?
you know what? It's funny you say that because you could tell, eventually, like I said, I learned the triggers, I learned the behaviors. And so I could tell, like, if I would come in the house, what was going to happen, how the day was going to be, just by the feel or the vibe in the house. Because I would always come into the house and I would always come in and speak. Whoever came home first, we would always speak. And I could tell if it was going to be a loving night where there was going to be, peace in the house, or I could tell if there was going to be a stressful night where I'm saying stressful for me, wondering, okay, what's going to happen? Is he just going to go to sleep? Because sometimes I would just pray that he would just go to sleep. Or is he going
Wow.
to find something to argue about? Or is there going to be a reaction to something, or, something that's triggered him, and I might not know what triggered him, and now he's bringing it home to the house, and am I going to have to be on my guard to what's going to happen through the night?
Yeah.
I got to the point where, like I said, my ex-husband was a drinker. I didn't like the holidays because, people tend to drink on the holidays. And so the holidays were not a very joyous occasion for me because I didn't know what to expect during the holidays. Not saying every time that he would drink, he would become angry, but I didn't know. So when the holidays would roll around, I knew that alcohol was going to be involved. I knew that people were going to be drinking, and I would get nervous and I would be stressed because I wouldn't know how it was going to play out. I didn't really care for the weekends because he would drink on the weekends. And so on Fridays, sometimes I would literally get sick just worrying about what I was going to be coming home to. Was I going to be coming home to a happy person that was drinking, or was I going to be coming home to a person who was agitated and looking for an argument and looking for a fight? Yeah. There was one chapter in my book that I talk about, and I called it Movie Night. And on the weekends, sometimes we would rent movies and we would get something to eat, and we would come back home and we would eat. And on this particular day, I knew he had been drinking. I could tell when I came home, but I thought he was going to be in his happy mood. So we went out, we rented movies, we got something to eat, we came back home, we sat down and we ate and we started watching the movie. And I could hear him saying something, but I really couldn't tell what he was saying because he was kind of slurring his words. But something inside of me said, to get ready, get your guard up. And that's what I did. And within a split second, he was on top of me, hitting me, punching me in my face and in my head. And just that fast, he had switched. And so that's why I tell people I'm not real big around being around people that drink, because that is a trigger for me.
Right.
When I'm around alcohol.
You got to worry
Yeah.
about those triggers for sure.
Huh?
You got to worry about those triggers for sure. Just really quickly, because I know sometimes people that are in abusive situations, they are manipulated by folks that are involved in the family as well. And you mentioned that y'all had children. So how much of the children did he use as a manipulating tool? Because I do know some folks that have been in abusive situations, and sometimes they will find the children as pawns in the game.
Like I said, his abuse was always towards me. He would never really use our kids. Matter of fact, he would try to keep it, even though I know they knew it was going on and they heard it, but it was never in front of them. He would always make sure that we were in our bedroom, or if they were in their room. There was only a couple of times where he exploded in front of them. But most of the time he would try to keep it because he wanted to keep the persona that he was not this person in front of them, if that makes sense. To everybody else in the world, we seemed like the perfect couple. I mean, we had the house, the car. He had the job, and I had learned to make sure that I looked a certain way when we were out in public. I learned how to let him be the one to lead conversations. I really didn't talk much. I kind of just stayed quiet because it was the image for him. So out in public, nobody knew what was going on behind closed doors. And he was very careful about making sure that it stayed behind closed doors.
Yeah. I know that one of the other things that you sometimes hear people talk about that are in abusive situations is this notion of folks that are family members not being willing to accept what was going on and everything like that. So I was wondering, did you have family members in your own family that you were able to approach, and did they just buy into the narrative that he was not being abusive? And did he have family members? Because I know a lot of times, whether it's in television versions or in real life, you hear people that'll say that they had no idea what was going on, but you'll have other people that'll say that they saw the warning signs, but they were afraid to speak out.
Oh yeah, I still have family members to this day that don't believe that it occurred, that it didn't happen. They, you tell them what's going on, and the first thing they say is, "No, I don't believe that," because, like I said, in front of everyone, he was a likable person. They're like, I just can't believe that's happening. And then you have the ones that will say, "Well, I just can't believe you would stay. Why would you allow that to happen to you?" When you're in an abusive relationship, like I said, it started before we were even married. And when we got married, we were 18. So we were still young. And in my mind, I thought that I was deserving of this. Maybe I did something wrong. And so when you started, like I said, I was looking to him for approval. I was seeking approval through him. I started believing the things that he was telling me, that I was the reason why he got drunk and got abusive. What did I do? After each argument and each fight, I would ask myself, okay, so what did I do to cause this to happen? What did I do to set him off? Not knowing that it wasn't me at all. It was him. Yeah. And so, I had a lot of family members who, like I said, to this day, still don't believe. I get a lot of victim shaming and blaming still to this day.
Speaking of victim
it's very
shaming,
hard to come out and speak about it and be upfront about it. Like when I left, everybody was in shock. They were like, "You left?" And I had people say, "Why did you leave? You left your house and you left your car and you left all this security, financial security." And I'm thinking, but what about my life? Yeah. No one's saying, you left to save your life. Everybody is talking about the stuff that I left behind. They were like, "I would have
the material things."
Huh?
Yeah, the materials.
Yeah, they were all thinking about the material things. And I was like, well, what about my
victim
life?
shaming and all along those lines, Ms. Strickland, one of the things that I was curious about, because I had a friend, she's remarried. She actually is in an interracial relationship right now and everything. But at the time, she was a white woman that was married to a white man, and it was very much an abusive relationship and everything like that. But they were also very much involved in their church. And sometimes the church, and I know I might be stepping on some toes here and everything, Dr. Diamond and Dean, but y'all know I don't mind stepping on toes and everything like that. But sometimes the church is afraid to deal with issues like that because of that whole notion of for better or for worse, and the whole notion of sticking in the relationship forever, and all along those lines that we do if you go into a marriage vow. And I've never been married, but I have many friends, including my brother, that have been married, and all along those lines. But I just wondered, how much did the church play into trying to keep y'all together? Because like I said, when I think about this friend of mine and what she was going through with her husband, and that was an abusive relationship, the church knew it was an abusive relationship, but they were trying to encourage them to stay together because of the vows that they had taken. So I was wondering, how much did that play into your conversation, Ms. Strickland?
It did play a lot because, like I said, you when you're a believer, you want to follow God's word. And like you said, for better or for worse. And then my ex-husband was very good at playing on the scripture, submit to your husband, wives submit to your husbands. But, until I fully, and then, you have the Christians that say, just pray about it, just pray about it. And I'm like, well, I'm doing all these things. and nothing is happening. It wasn't until I really started becoming more involved myself with reading and understanding the Bible that I found that God doesn't, abuse is a sin, and God does not condone abuse. It's not, God did not create man and wife for a woman to be stepped on, to be trampled over, to be mistreated. God created man and woman, and the woman was to be the partner. Yes, the man leads the household, but the woman is his partner who walks along beside him, not behind him, not beneath him. And so it wasn't until I started reading scripture and I started studying the word for myself that I became aware of what I was living in was not what God had planned for me.
Yeah. Just really quickly, then I'm gonna turn it back over to my esteemed people that actually it's their show and everything. So Dr. Diamond, they can be taking over and everything along those lines. But one of the things that I'm curious about is how were you able to cope after you left the relationship? Because I do know that sometimes that can be another whole journey, and you probably talk about it in the book. I've got a dear friend of mine that is a single mother and everything, and I think Nikki's in her early 50s and all along those lines. So she's actually got 4 kids of her own, and I think she's got multiple grandkids. It might even be 5 or 6. I've lost track of how many grandkids she's got and everything like that. But I do know that sometimes people will say that they also want to stay in the relationship because they're afraid of going back out into the dating pool and being alone and going back out into the dating pool and everything like that. So how were you able to cope with that? Because I know that that's a conversation I've had with this dear friend of mine for a number of years and all along those lines. And she's even stepped into some probably other toxic relationships. As a matter of fact, she would probably even say they've been equally as toxic as the one that she stepped out of.
Well, when I left my marriage, it was I knew that because I had been trauma bonded, I was codependent, all these things. I was, a shell of a woman. I knew that I needed therapy. And so the first thing I did was once I got out, I found a therapist because I didn't want to be like your friend and jump right back into another toxic relationship. And so through therapy, I learned that it was okay for me to grieve. I did love this man. I married him. I was with him since I was 14. That was most of my life. I didn't leave my marriage until I was in my 40s. And so I needed to grieve that. It was like a loss. So I needed to grieve it. And it was okay for me to grieve it. And then it was okay for me to have anger, and it was okay for me to miss him, and it was okay for me to, love him. It's okay to love someone and know that you can't be with that person. Those are things I had to learn on my own. And my therapist was amazing. And I had to learn how to cope by myself because, like I said, since the age of 18, I was married. So I had to learn how to. Fortunately, my kids were adults when I left, so they were off living their lives. And so I could really focus on regaining and rebuilding myself. Like I said, I had to learn how to cope to being alone and cope, being able to take care of myself by myself and learn how to date myself. My therapist would give me assignments and say, go date yourself, go out to a movie, go to a restaurant, go do all those things that you wanted to do, but you were afraid to do when you were married. Yeah. So I had to learn how to get comfortable with being with myself. That was a major thing. I tell a lot of survivors, you have to do the work. You can't it's not as simple as just packing your belongings and leaving. Once you get out of that relationship, you still have to deal with all the trauma that's with you, all the bags that you carried out with you, the mental and the verbal, and all those things are still stuck in your head. The verbal abuse that you endured, the mental abuse that you endured, the psychological abuse you endured. For a long time, it was hard for me to sleep by myself in my bed because I was so used to, even though I knew leaving my marriage was the right thing to do, the part of being alone was a big part, was scary for me. And so I had to learn how to learn how to do things by myself, for myself, and to love myself, and not seek love from other people, but to seek that love from myself.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
You bring up some interesting points and all along those lines because I know one of the things that I think about and everything, and sometimes people don't think about it, but and I'm just gonna put it out there. Man can be emotionally abused as well because I know that I was in such a situation and everything like that. And sometimes it's because the person that was abused or had been abused brings that abuse to their new relationships. It sounds like
Mhm.
you done the smart thing by going into therapy, so you won't necessarily do that and everything. But I do know some people that have been in abusive situations and they bring that abuse into
Yeah.
their new relationships. In other words, they
Because
flip the script. In other words, they become the abuser
they
instead
become
of
the
the abused.
abuser because they
They
haven't
become
healed. And
right.
so
Mhm.
what I see with a lot of survivors is they don't do the work to heal, and then they'll go into another relationship, and then they'll automatically off the bat start accusing this man. Well, he's this, he's that, he's this, he's well, you haven't really given them a chance because you're still carrying the baggage from your previous relationship. And
Yeah.
so I knew I didn't want to do that. I knew in my next relationship, I knew that I didn't want to bring that in because, this might be my Joshua. I always say I'm looking for a Joshua. This might be the love of my life. And here I am bringing in baggage that's going to run them off.
Yeah. How do you get away from
Yeah.
not doing that though? Because that's what I ran into was the young lady had was comparing me to the other person and then
Mhm.
was making it abusive. And you were talking about having to leave, and that's literally what I did. I literally packed my bags and one day just caught that up because I get around by mass transit as Dr. Diamond and Dean know and everything. So I literally caught the bus from one city to the next city because I'd been going back and forth and all along those lines. But I came back to my hometown city because it had gotten to the point of no return as far as I was concerned and everything like that. So it's time for me to. Sometimes you got to walk, and I'm sure that you recognize that you got to that breaking point as well. So I just knew that it was a bad relationship, and I needed to get those walking shoes of walking and everything like that. So in that case, so busted shoes are walking, but it still worked. So I knew I needed to get out of that particular situation. So I just wondering, are you ever concerned, one, that you might fall into that trap yourself at some point, and two, that your parent, that not your parents, but your kids may fall into that trap?
Um, for me, what I did was, like I said, through therapy, I learned what my triggers were, and I learned how to look at the green flags and the red flags. So when I go into a relationship, I'm very transparent. I might not come out on the first date, but I will eventually tell that person, look, I am a survivor of domestic violence. And, these are things like I really can't tolerate a man that drinks. I know that that's a trigger for me. So
Right.
I let them know up front, if you're a drinker, this relationship's not going to work for me because I'm always going to be on guard and I'm
Mm.
always going to be apprehensive. I just look for I'm very transparent about the things that upset me, the triggers, and I'm very open with what I experienced. And so hopefully by sharing that with the next person or with the man that I'm dealing with, if this is too much for them to handle, I'm letting them know this up front. This is who I am. This is what I'm bringing to the table. These are the things I will tolerate. These are the things I cannot tolerate. These are the things that are triggers for me. These are the things that um, I can't deal with in a relationship. And so if you're willing to stand beside me and if you think you can handle it, then that's fine. But I've had men where I've told them I don't think this will be a good relationship. I'll let them know up front. I date them. I've dated them for a couple of times. We spent time together. And if I feel uneasy about anything, I'm pretty open about it. I tell them right away.
Which is a good thing because you are being upfront and you are also your self-awareness is your key.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you could step back to the younger version of you. What
Okay.
red flags would you have taught her to look for? Because there were red flags, and when no one teaches you to look for those things, what were those red flags back then when she was about 14 years old?
Yeah. So when I was like I said, when I was 14 years old, that's when I became pregnant with our first child. And even back then, he would, verbally say things that were, offensive. Like he would say things about me being pregnant, or he would say things about me not looking a certain way, or, and I would think to myself, okay, I'm carrying your child. This is our child. I'm
Right.
going to gain weight. These things, my body's going to change. I would tell my younger self that this is not the right place for you. But I was so wanting to be accepted. I was so wanting to be loved because, like I spoke earlier, I was struggling with my relationship with my mom. And so I was so wanting to be loved. I was so valued, and I would have done anything then to get his approval and his acceptance, because I thought, okay, I'm carrying your child. I thought that, this is love, when back then I should have realized it was infatuation. It wasn't love. I so wanted to be a part of him that I was willing to do anything. Now I would tell my younger self, I don't need him. That I probably should have been, if I would have left him, who's to say what my life would have been? I probably would have been a totally different person. I probably would have had a lot more, how can I put it? I probably would have loved myself a whole lot more if I would have stopped chasing him when I was 14. I probably would have learned my value and my worth if I would have paid attention to myself. Because I didn't realize that's what I was seeking as a young child. I didn't realize that I was seeking approval from someone who actually wasn't going to ever give it to me. I would have never, I would have told my younger self, he's never going to give you the approval that you're seeking. He's never going to value you the way that you're going to be valued. He's never going to really know your worth, because all he's concerned about is himself. So I would have told my younger self to walk away. You got this. You can handle this by yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think, those that are listening now and those that will be listening later need to know that, how would you guide your younger self? But then also, most importantly, can you guide the younger girls that are around you now? So just in case if they ever, run into a person like that, they can see, what are the signs, and then how much do you value yourself? I like that you stayed in that realm also, valuing yourself. What would that have been like if you knew that? But also, I think because, as you mentioned, that your relationship with mom was not the most harmonious relationship. So if you don't have the tools, you wouldn't know what to do if it's not invested in you, So it's very tough.
I would have, I think if what I know now, I think I would have seeked out talking to other women or someone, outside of my home instead of my mom. I think I would have reached out to, that woman, that mentor at the church, or that teacher at the school who would try to pull me to the side and talk to me, but I didn't really want to listen to what they had to say. I think I would have listened to what they had to say. Yeah.
Because
teen dating is really bad right now. You have a lot of teens that are dating that are already in abusive relationships.
Yes, they are.
I interjected. I was at somewhere getting something to eat one evening, and I heard these teenage girls talking, and they were talking about, one of them was talking about how she was fighting with her boyfriend, and she thought that was, and I hit him, he hit me, and it was like she was bragging about, and I got this in, and I got this lick in, and I got that lick in, and I wasn't going to say anything, but I just couldn't walk away. And I had to walk over and tell her, how old are you? I asked her age, and she told me she was 16. I said, you're 16. And if you're already fighting with this guy, he is not the guy for you. You are worth so much more than some guy or, beating up on you. You need to see yourself I told her, so you need to see yourself the way that God sees you. You are a queen. You are worthy. You know, you're beautifully and fearfully made. You know, when he created you, he broke the mold. There's only one you. You are unique. I mean, they listened to what
Yes.
I was saying, but I just felt bad that she thought that that was, you know, this. I told her this does not have to be your life.
No, not at all.
That's
And
right.
I
Miss
mean, you're
Strickland, how do
63 years
you?
old. This does not have to be your life. You can stop this now. You can walk away from this now. That way you don't grow up and be in your 30s and your 40s and still fighting and thinking that that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach people that are in those situations? Because I can tell you, I mentioned it earlier. I am a mass transit person here in Durham, North Carolina. I mean that I get around by mass transit. And I have also seen that where girls are and guys are bragging about being in what you know are abusive relationships. But you know, a lot of times, and Dean knows this, just like Dr. Diamond knows, a lot of times you're afraid to approach them because you don't want to get pulled into the conversation with their family members or their aunts or their uncles or be that whole conflict kind of thing. But you know that you need to tell them to kind of like ease up on which way they're heading and all along those lines and everything like that because they might be heading for trouble. They might be even heading to some of those places that Dean and Dr. Diamond work at and everything along those lines. So how do you approach people like that? Because I know that even here in North Carolina that I see those kind of conversations like you ran into with that young lady, particularly in this age of social media when there's so many people that are caught up in the bullying of social media. On the other network that I have this show, but as part of this on Pod TV and everything that I do some of my shows on, we have a show about bullying, and that's actually what they deal with a lot is this epidemic, and they call it an epidemic of bullying and everything like that that can play into this abusive situation.
Like I said, with that one, I almost walked away, but something inside of me told me to turn back. Usually I just go with my discernment. You know, sometimes I might say something depending on the situation. Sometimes I don't. I really, if God leads me to say something, I will say something. And I normally approach it, you know, on their level. I usually try to speak to them on their level. I don't try to make myself seem bigger than they are or better than they are. I just really, you know, like with those girls, I just walked over and I said, hey, you know, I overheard y'all talking. Can I share something with you? And they said yes. Now, if they would have said no, then I probably would have just walked away. But they said yes. And so that let me know that they were open to hear what I had to say. And I didn't really go into detail of my story. I just told them, hey, I am a survivor of abuse, domestic violence. Um, you know, and I told them, I said, this doesn't have to be your life. You know, I hear you talking about you're fighting with your boyfriend. You know, like I said, I asked her age and I told her, I said, you know, you're 16 years old. You have a whole lot of life in front of you. And fighting with another kid or fighting with your boyfriend shouldn't be a part of that life. That shouldn't be a part of your story. And it doesn't have to be a part of your story. You know, I don't know what her home life was like, so I didn't bring that up. I didn't talk about her home life. I just talked about her. I said, you know, your future can look like this, or your future can look like this. I said, you don't want to be like me and wake up one day and be in your 40s and all your life you've been fighting and you've lost yourself and you don't know who you are. You know, I said, you don't have, this doesn't have to be your story. You know, you're fighting with some kid is not the right thing. That's not a healthy relationship. Like I said, I don't know what she was seeing at home, but I let her know that that's not healthy.
Yeah, agreed. It really isn't. So I have one question for you also, Stephanie. How has your journey as a DV survivor shaped the way you see yourself today? And not just in your healing, but reclaiming your voice?
My journey has been a very long journey. Like I said, when I came out of my marriage, I didn't really have a voice. And so for me to start speaking up, that took a lot of courage for me. It took a lot of prayers. It took a lot of commitment. Like I say, even now, I pray before I go out and speak. I pray about events that I speak at. I pray on podcasts before I speak. I've made a promise to God that I said, okay, God, if you get me out of this situation, if you help me to heal, if you show me the right way, then I'm gonna give it back. I'm gonna be that light. I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna share my story, even though there are days where I get the still the shaming and the blaming. Those are still things that are relevant today, and sometimes they can be very depleting. I still get up, and I still, every chance I get, every chance that I feel that it's right, I share my story. I talk about it. I think finding my voice was and still is a journey.
Mm-hmm. So tell us how you began to write your book then, because that's why I wanted to lead you to how that your voice became, louder, because at some point in your lifetime, in your journey, it was muted to the point where you probably wouldn't even say a word. Now your voice is bigger, and you took that same voice and you began to write your narrative. So what was that like for you? Like how did you get to that place of writing this?
I kept finding myself in situations where I'd say God was forcing me to have to share my story. And so I was always a journal. I always journal. I always wrote things down. And so I was talking with my therapist, and she said, you should probably write a book, even if you don't share it with anybody, just a book for yourself, put your story into words and make it into a book. And I said, okay, let me see about this. And then I started writing it down, and then it seemed like once I started doing that, God just started placing people in my lives. I found this editor who was willing to help me to turn my journals into a book, which is what I did. And so that's what I did. And when I wrote the book, I put the book out, and I thought that was going to be the end of it. I was like, okay, God, I wrote the book, I put the book out, and I'm done. I'm finished. But then once the book came out, people started asking me to come and speak. People started reading the book, and they were contacting me and letting me know how the book inspired them and touched them. And my book, it got nominated for an award, which I wasn't really expecting. And then I won the award. And then it just blew up after that. Just like God just blew the doors open, and people started really reaching out to me and saying, hey, Stephanie, I want to work with you. Let's do this. Let's do that. You'd be a great mentor to women. You'd be a great person to add to a support group. You would be a great person to speak at this event. And I didn't know why I was such a great person. They said, because you're just so transparent. You're, even in my book, I'm very transparent about the things that happened to me. They said people need to hear the real version of it, and not the BS version of it, if I can say that correctly. A lot of people still cover up that they are survivors of abuse. They don't want to share the whole story. But God told me, he said, if we're going to do this, you're going to have to be transparent. You're going to have to share everything. And I think that's what helped me to gain my voice, was being able to, and to write the book. It was being able to not have to sugarcoat it, but to tell it like it really happened.
Yeah. You will save so many lives, with anyone reading your book. But even if they don't get a chance to read your book, getting on podcasts and going out and doing speaking engagements is your other avenues of reaching people who need to hear your story for what it is. And from what I'm picking up from you, it's raw. It's raw. It's nothing tainted about it. You're telling the truth, and you're letting people know this is what my reality was, but my reality is no longer that. This is my new reality, is what the healing journey looked like. And it sounds like you're still on your healing journey, because you're healing, and you're healing others at the same time. So it's a wonder what God does. When he puts you on the healing journey to heal others, you're healing yourself at the same time. It's something that I've learned through time, being a therapist myself. When you talk about earlier grieving, my grieving was a little different than yours. Mine was more of losing a parent at a very young age, and then you change and you begin to be a different person. But like you said, the grieving part, when you begin to understand that and understand what healing looks like, it becomes a part of your journey. So my healing became other people's healing. So I really connect with you on that, and the purpose of us walking this wavy line, because we think the life is supposed to be straight. No, it's supposed to be all of these curves, and eventually we'll get on that straight and narrow road that God puts us on. So I think you're doing a great job.
I feel that a lot of women should speak up more about their experiences, their life experiences, because a lot of women are going through it and they feel like they have no one to talk to, or they feel like they have no one they can go to and share it with, because we put on this mask like, oh, my life has been so perfect, or my life has been so, so good, that they don't want to share about the struggles that they had to go through, the insecurities, the low self-esteem. And, because as women, we all experience that. And I think my grieving process, I got angry, which the anger helped me to heal, because I told myself I was never going to be in a relationship like that again. So I knew I had to do the work so I could know and recognize the signs and not put myself back in the same situation.
Ms. Strickland, how much, and I kind of alluded to it before when I mentioned the comment about the church and everything, but how much do you think it's also a fear of dealing with some very strong institutions? Because you mentioned your husband was in the military, and I know that abuse can be very prominent in the military, because I have friends that are in the military, I have relatives that have been in the military and all along those lines. But sometimes you're afraid to tackle those institutions because they are powerful institutions, whether it's the military, whether it's the prison environment, or whether it's schools, or whether it's the church. So I just wondering, how much do you think that's part of the problem, is that people are afraid to approach authority figures, because sometimes the authority figures can even be involved in the abuse. I went to a Catholic university, and we all know what the Catholic reputation is when it comes to child abuse and all along those lines and everything like that. So I'm just wondering, how much is it that we're afraid to tackle some powerful institutions?
So you're correct, because my ex-husband was military. So I knew that if I was to go to his command and say that this was going on in my home, that I would take the risk of him getting in trouble. And then he was the provider in our household. He was the main provider. So if he got in trouble at work, that would affect the income coming into the home. Or there would also be men at his command. Like you said, abuse is really prevalent in the military. They would cover it up, or they wouldn't say anything about it. So, you took the risk. You had to pick and choose. Okay, do I go and say something, or do I not say something? And so I chose not to say something, because, like you said, I knew other couples that were going through the same thing I was going through. And so I just figured, okay, this is a part of the life. And once again, he was the main provider. I didn't want to affect the income that was coming into the home. I knew that if I did go to his command and something was done that could affect his pay, then that would affect the livelihood.
Yeah.
As far as church go, you have I feel a lot of people in the church who don't know how to deal with domestic violence. And so they give out the wrong advice, the bad advice.
That's true. That's very true. I know it's getting close to you getting ready to serve, a different purpose here. So, I just want to make sure that we have, we're not going to, stop you from going to your next task. So,
before she leaves, just really quickly, I do have to tease her with my last question.
Okay.
I just want to know, and it's a very simple but fun question and everything, Ms. Strickland. I know I've asked some very deep questions and everything like that, but there's a major TV star that also went through various abuses and everything. So I just want to know, when are you going to appear on Oprah? So I just want to know, when are you going to appear on Oprah? Because we know that Oprah's gone through some stuff as well. So I just want to know
when Oprah calls me, we'll know, right?
Right. I'll be the first one watching. And I say, I know her. She was on my show,
Exactly. Then you can say that you had her first.
I can say I was here first. There you go.
That is so true. That is so true. Your story very remarkable from what I can hear, and you as the survivor. You came from this young person to enduring so much and was able to find your voice, and that is the key within your healing process. And it's so awesome that you have gotten to that place and that you're helping others. Just in case, Dean, if you didn't hear Stephanie earlier, she has a lot of wonderful things going on. I want you to talk about those things before you go, what you're doing, and then what that looks like. And I would love to have you back again on our show. So I'll reach out to you soon. So when I know that you have more flexibility, so then we can talk a little bit longer. But talk about what you're doing now.
So now what I do is, like I said, on Saturdays, I mentor to other, it's a group of women, and I mentor to them on how to overcome abuse, because these are women who have been in abusive relationships, and some of them are still in the relationships, and they're trying to navigate their life through it. Should I stay? Should I leave?
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to mentor to them, not telling them, ultimately it is up to them if they want to leave or if they want to stay. And so I'm just there to mentor to them and to share my experience and to give them some things that I've learned over the years to help them navigate through what they're going through.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And you know what? So with all of that, and I know I've been quiet, I've just been listening, but you went from silence to strength. So your story is no longer theirs to tell, but yours.
Exactly.
You walked away, not because
exactly.
you
I took back my story. I did. I took it back.
And you didn't leave, you just didn't leave the pain. You reclaimed your power.
I reclaimed my power, and I tell people I went from a victim to a survivor to a thriver. So, and I tell people there's nothing wrong with, once you can accept it, once I knew I could accept it, I knew I was healing. Because like I said, for so long, so many women they stay silent about the abuse because they can't accept that it happened to them. Once I could accept, okay, this is what happened to me. This is what I experienced. And, I had to take some accountability in it. I stayed for 26 years. So I had to take some accountability in that. So once I could accept all of that, then I began to heal. And then now I can mentor to other women and, and I can help them navigate through what they're going through.
And to help them also to know that every step forward is a declaration that they deserve peace, they deserve respect, and they deserve joy.
Yes. And to let them also know that it's not going to be easy, that it's going to be hard days, and be okay with that. Just know that what you did was the right decision for you.
Mm-hmm.
And be okay with the hard days.
Yes, exactly. These women that you mentor, are you mentoring them face to face? Is it virtual? How do you mentor them? Through what avenue are you doing this?
Right now it's virtual, but I'm working with someone that I want to do it to where it's an in-person environment where we can actually meet and have an in-person environment and meet with each other and, touch and hug and, cry together and all those things that come apart. That's a part of healing. And so, that's what I'm working on right now, is to be able to do that. I'm also working on another book that's really going to be more like a tool that survivors can use. I'm going to have exercises in there for them to do, like go out and date yourself and things like that. Nice. So I'm really trying to stay. I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel like this is my purpose. And so I'm really trying to stay with that and not seek out the fame, is what people say. People, some people do stuff for the glory and the fame, and that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I really want to change lives.
Yes. Yep. And you're on that journey, and that's what you realize. This is what I'm doing. So that is so awesome. And I'm glad that you found that voice and you know your assignment. And that is an awesome thing to do. My sister, you came through some hardship. You found yourself. And like Dean said, you found your joy. And now you're helping them find their joy and their voice.
Yes.
So with saying that, I want to hear your parting words before you leave us today and move on to your next task. What are your parting words here on the couch?
So my parting words here on the couch is, don't give up on yourself. Believe in who God says you are. You can overcome abuse. You can have a life after abuse. You can have a very peaceful and joyful life after abuse. My son, I have 3 sons, and they tell me all the time, Mom, you're different. And that means in a good way, because I'm more laughter now, more calm now. I'm not so nervous and antsy now, I'm more relaxed. And, I think they like this version of me. And I'm grateful that I was able to get to this place, because some women don't get out of it. So, I tell people all the time, just believe in who you are and believe in what God is telling you. And if this is what you're supposed to be doing, then do it. It's not easy to leave, but you can leave and you can have life after abuse.
Yes. So you all heard what Stephanie said. There's life after abuse. So there is survival. And she's telling you because she is your walking testimony of being that survivor. We are talking to a survivor right now, survivor
Yes.
and a thriver. And she took that, you took that and you wrote your book about it. And I thought that's awesome. It is so awesome. And just so you know, just giving people a little bit of background history, how I met Stephanie is because last year around this time, in October, she and I were on a workshop together where we were talking about educating those domestic violence. And the facilitator of that, Deborah Colston, wonderful woman, and she herself has also been a survivor. So, and next week I'll be going down there again to do the workshop. And I know Stephanie said she has some other prior engagements, but again, this is how I met this wonderful lady. She was sitting right next to me, so we're sitting next to each other, and I'm looking at her because I think you had your book there too. So I said, I'm looking at her book and I'm looking at. I said, okay. So for me, it was I'm going to get her on this show at some point. Hear her story, because I think I didn't get an opportunity to hear your story at that moment.
Because I think we ran out of time. Yeah.
Yes, we did. So I'm glad I was selfish enough to isolate you to me so we can talk about it, because I really wanted to know you and know your story. And I tell you what a wonderful person you are from what I'm hearing. And your 3 sons, when you come back again, I do want to hear how you invested in them and how you did not allow, maybe the development of relationships, because I know you had to show them a different way of having relationships. So again, I know you have to go, so I'm not going to hold you any longer. But I'll see you soon. I will reach out to you again. And Stephanie, keep going, girl. Keep on with your crown up on your head. And we thank you so much for joining us here on the couch. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. You take care. Until then.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
Not a problem. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Dean, we will continue with our discussion here with DV, and we will talk about, what's just, again, she talks so much about domestic violence, and we didn't ask her too much about the signs. I wanted to be careful not to, not that we were going to trigger her or anything, because like she said, she's healed now. She's gotten to a place where she's able to write about it and have a conversation about it. But those of you that are out there, you got to figure out or know the signs when you see what's going on. That's why I asked her about the younger self and the older version of herself, going back to the younger version to see the red flags. So when we talk about red flags, Dean, what red flags would you say we can educate our listeners on? What would be the red flags of those that may be showing or exhibiting signs of abusive behavior?
I think some of those things include the isolation when you start, the other person that you're in a relationship with starts to take you away from everybody, whether it be family, friends, whoever it is, and they spend all of their time, or they end up getting you to spend all of your time with only them. So it's the isolation, which after a while you start getting, in a way, tired of being. You have to have an outlet, and each person has to have their own outlet, whether they be dating, whether they be married, or whatever it is. But then if you're talking about signs, other signs include like constant criticism, insults, name calling, the gaslighting, making you doubt your own experience or sanity, blaming you for their behavior or their problems. It's your fault, threatening to harm you, threatening your children if you have any pets, or threatening to harm themselves. And that's one of those things where they try to guilt you into doing something that you normally would not do, but now that stress comes, dictating what you wear, where you go, who you talk to, preventing you from doing anything you really want to do, and trying to give you a reason why you shouldn't. Monitoring your phone, checking out your social media like a hawk, stalking you in a sense, where you're going, how long you're going to be there, when you're coming back, all of those different things. And then it gets worse. Then it goes to the physical abuse, where they start to put hands on it, choking, pushing, using weapons, you know what I'm saying? Dropping you off in a place where you don't know where the heck you are. Choosing what you eat, choosing when you sleep, getting getting medical attention. If they put their hands on you, now you can't go to the hospital, or when you get there, you gotta have this real creative Steven Spielberg reason as to what happened to you. You know what I mean? Then it goes down the rabbit hole for some sexual abuse, forcing sex or sex acts against their will, making them feel obligated to have sex with them or dress a certain way, new things. Well, they're not so much new, but they've been used, like those ad tags. You want to find out where somebody tracking them, spyware, checking call logs. I don't know. I'm running out of things because I think I covered a lot of them, but
you did. You had a lot of them. I'm going to go into. There are also specific abuse when you think about same-sex abuse, although we don't really talk about that too much, but we need to, because in those relationships also they can become very volatile, where it is, same thing, the threatening behavior, or if one person came out to their family and that person can use that or hold it over their heads and say, oh, since you didn't come out to your family, this is how I'm going to control you by saying I'm going to come out, tell your family, or what your sexual choices are. That is another way of controlling a person, using that person's identity, to shame them, to make them feel some type of way. So again, to isolate, to control. Anyone that understands domestic violence, what the foundation to this is control. If another person can control you in a way that they're using gaslight, so gaslighting you is like a big part of it. Once they gaslight you and they can control the situation or control you, they got you, and then the goal is, how do I get out of that? So you start thinking about, what are the ways do I get out of that? as you heard Stephanie today, you know, especially I hope you all get her book. I gotta tell you the name of her book as well when I get a moment here.
We'll post
I'll
it on
tell
the
you
page
that.
as well.
Yeah, we'll post it on the page as well so you can get her book and support her. But in the end, when you think about understanding one, the signs, and number two, when do you begin to realize that you're in this domestic violence situation and how to get out of it? So realizing it would be understanding what we just talked about, those red flags. Now, how do you get away from a person in advance? Well, you can get away from them in advance because if they have these sudden anger outbursts, so out of nowhere, they just go off on you about what you have on and tell you why you have that on, or in controlling you, and you're just in a dating phase. At that moment, you have the right to say to that person, you know what, I'm my own person. And matter of fact, I don't think this is going to work. That is something that Stephanie had said earlier when she talked about how a person's drinking is her trigger. It's her self-awareness is what tells her this may not be the relationship for me. She ended those relationships as soon as possible. I would recommend that for anyone who are possibly going through a domestic violence relationship. If you begin to see signs and a person is trying to control you, isolate you from your family, just as Dean said, that's a problem. Or criticizing your relationship with your family. They're angry because you have a close relationship with your family because they may never have that. So they're going to say something about your family or isolate you from your family. You have to stand up and say, no, you have to value yourself more in that relationship. So that would be making those hard choices to get away. And and materials shouldn't keep you there either. I noticed that was something that Stephanie was talking about, that her family couldn't believe it, and other people, and all they mentioned is materials. And like she said, they never mentioned her life. So that means her life to them wasn't important, but the materials, because she left them behind. They are materials, people. They can be replaced at any time. But
If
no
you want
one,
to replace it.
if you want to replace it, and if your life is at stake, why would we subject ourselves to abuse for materials?
Right.
Why? So a lot of people have done that. I think a lot of it is fear. Others, it's a fear of living without that person or not having. So it's a multitude of reasons that people would stay in such a volatile type of lifestyle. So, you know, we have to just be careful that a lifestyle shouldn't keep us in a relationship where we have to survive from it, you know, and that is just a couple of things that we want you all to know. Again, control is the foundation of how domestic violence happen. It is very subtle as well. It isn't something that is going to creep up on you, but you have to pay attention to the signs. Look at that person who you're dealing with, how they act towards you, how they act towards your friends, family, all of those things. Once that person gets to isolate, that is a key time to get away from them, especially if you're a social person.
And
if you're
also,
social, go deep.
right. And if you or someone you know is experiencing those signs, help is always available at the National Domestic Violence Hotline. The number is actually 1-800-799-7233. So that's 1-800-799-SAFE. So be sure.
Yes.
It offers confidential support 24/7, 365. So there's always, if you don't have anyone that you could talk to right there with you, there's someone that you can get in touch with to help you get away from that abuse.
Yes. So Mark, welcome back. So we was just talking about, of course, continuing our conversation about the signs of domestic violence. Now, Mark, you had alluded earlier that you were pretty much in a domestic violence situation. What would you say, more emotional, psychological, or both? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
There
We
we
can hear
go.
you now.
Cool. So yeah, I was just saying that it was more emotional because a lot of times men are more involved in emotional. Don't get me wrong though, there's some women that get knocked out as well and everything like that. But it was more of an emotional abuse, and it was because they had been involved in an abusive situation that I kind of alluded to and everything, and they were bringing that into our relationship. Because a lot of times,
Hmm.
they say leave the baggage at the door, but not everybody is good at leaving the baggage at the door. So that's what it was. Is they had to bring some of that past baggage into the new relationship.
Yes, yes. So, but I have, it's just me, the female here on this line. So, the two men here. Uh, Dean Geronimo, have you ever been in a situation of someone trying to harm you, or have you experienced any forms of abuse in any relationships that you've been in?
Unfortunately, I have been in a situation, and I think when looking back, it was a tense situation. It should not have been that tense because should have been smart enough to take off when instead of staying there. But when you're younger and you believe that things will work out or things will finally be okay. And then you may have a good day and you think that the whole world is good. And then the next day you get hit in your head with an old school skillet and you're trying to figure out how did we get here? It's the setup. Older me realizes that now. Younger me thought, and you never think of put your hands on, for us men, put your hands on a woman. We weren't raised like that now. So you end up thinking things won't go as far as they can. Then when it does, you're trying to figure out what's the next step. Automatically you want to react, attack, but then you start thinking, because in most places, who's going to go to jail?
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, it's set up that way. She could be 5 feet tall. He could be 6. She could weigh 110. He could be 390. And she can beat him up if she hits them the right way in the right place. But optically, they'll look at him and look at her and almost automatically revert to, there's no way she can beat him up. But now, like you said, fast forward in the business in which we work in, we've seen some small guys take care of some real big guys. And
Mm-hmm.
size means nothing when the intent and anger and aggression is built up stronger than the individual who you are standing against. So, you have to be real careful. And, fellas, if you in one of those situations where it starts out small, man, where you going? Who you going with? What time you coming back? Or you've been gone too long, or you went to work all day, you come home and it's like you've been out cheating. You know what? The first one who smelt it dealt it. And it's one of those things where it's like, but you don't think about that at the first, at the beginning. Your wallet and your phone, 2 things for men and women. They start creeping in that, you got a problem. Because if you don't have trust, if you don't have communication, you don't have those things, you don't have love. And I'm not talking about just when you're having sex. That doesn't mean anything. But what happens when the sex is not there? What happens when, can you all have a civil conversation? Can you not agree on, you might not agree on stuff, but does it turn into a fight? Or do you just say, state your case, they state theirs, and then you say, you know what, let's go do something else because this one ain't working. When are you going to, some people can't do that. And when you come into some people who are not able to do that, I don't care how much you think you love. You mean you better love yourself better and get away from it. Or we'll love you at your grave site. Make a choice. It's a harsh way to say it, but it's a thing that you had to. I don't care how scared you are. Find that person, somebody, whether they be by love, blood, or somebody that's willing to help. If you need to get out, get out.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Get out.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to get out. Like I told Miss Strickland, sometimes you just got to move out and get out of that situation and all along those lines because sometimes that's just a necessity and everything. But there's a lot of different ways, and you kind of alluded to it, Dean, that people can be involved in abusive relationships and everything like that. Because people can withhold. We know that we all are sexual beings and we enjoy that part of our life. So that can be a form of abuse, and all along those lines. We also know that sometimes people might know your favorite food, and they might have the food as a weapon and everything. So there are different ways that
Mhm.
people can do the abuse and everything, whether that is withholding something that you like, or whether that's kind of like boycotting it as a form of abuse, or all along those lines. But there can also be sometimes that you're a little worried because sometimes you don't want to, you maybe have trust issues as well. So sometimes you might be sitting there going like, wait a minute, the food is not all that great, and they might decide to put something in the food. Because that that's happened in life as well, where people have gotten to the point of wanting to put arsenic or whatever in the food because they were a little upset and everything like that.
True.
It's true. That's true. There is such a fine line with how you protect yourself in such situations as domestic violence. There are a lot of people that have lost their lives due to domestic violence, and those that have tried to fight back, and many women and men, but I would say large amount of African American women have ended up in prison because they had to take out their abuser. Because in the world of the justice, as we can look at it, social justice, for some reason they don't believe that Black women are victims of domestic violence. And I'm talking about society as a whole. That comes back to us not believing when we go into the hospital that we are in pain. So when they look at it, that's another version of us saying, or society saying, you Black women can take it. It's your mouth that probably got you to where you are. So if you got beat up, oh well. But then when the person is holding their ground and the woman has become fed up with it, and like the young lady that years ago, the one that shot the warning sign in the ceiling against the husband or the boyfriend, and they locked her up for it. She didn't even shoot him. She shot up in the air, giving him a warning. And then months later, a Caucasian woman did the same thing, and she didn't have the problem. So, it's sad because you feel like you can't call the police into the situation to protect you, because you're going to be seen as the person that's going to be hauled off into prison. So it's just a fine line that we all have to walk, especially those that in the African American community. So it's just a difficult walk to walk on, because you don't know, can you be protected? So I was just thinking about that, as the two of you were talking, especially you, Dean, when you said, you got hit across your head with a skillet, then the police come and it's like, huh? She really did that? Again, and they're not familiar that men can go through abuse. They're not familiar with that.
You know what the first thing that was said? God damn, what did you do? I got my ass whipped. You know what I mean? And I mean, as a grown man, I thought I was grown then, but I now know I wasn't. But you look at it and you say, you know what's the next step now? Like, do they want it? And you fall back into that. Do you want to press charges? Well, you know what? I don't want this to happen or that to happen. And it was like, you know what? Me now was like, bad choice, bro. You should have gone ahead and said, yes, my head is hurting. I can't see out this eye. And it was not my fault. Oh, well, it is partially because of something I said. And maybe I shouldn't have said what I said, but did it deserve that? In the same way as when a lot of women meet these guys who want to control, and they put their hands on because you're not doing, or you said something that they don't necessarily care for. So at what point does an individual, and then they make it even harder because you got to go, and you might have to go get a temporary restraining order,
Yeah.
and then go back to get a permanent restraining order before you can really protect yourself. And it's almost like, at what point do we, and I wish it could be like a drop squad where, you call some guys and oh, so you did that? All right, we'll come see you. We're not going to tell you when we get there, but we'll show up and we'll have a different conversation. It doesn't work like that, though, in the real world. So now you have to figure out, what can you do to get individuals away from other individuals who believe that they can control, and like the older folks used to say, you can't control anything except yourself until two things happen. One already happened for most of us who have melanin. You're Black.
Yep.
Only other thing, and you can't control it either, is one day you're going to pass away.
Yes.
Two definites in this world. Controlling somebody is not a part of that equation. So, even with children, when people kind of like mistreat children, you are supposed to guide them, not rule over, if you would. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
exactly.
It's a thin line, but you got to find that middle ground. And when you find that middle ground, go ahead and when we talk about abuse, reclaim your time, the things that you like to do, the places you like to go. If they don't like it, leave them where they stand, because that's not the individual that's not willing to walk with you. They're trying to drag you with them. We don't always do the same things or go to the same places. I like Skittles. You know what I'm saying? What if you didn't like Skittles?
Right.
Well, I'm gonna be mad. That's dumb. And people, and I use that because it's something small, but usually it's something that's small that happens, and then individuals will turn those ant hills into molehills, and it's a big problem. And when you start digging and going back, well, what started this argument? Oh, they wanted French fries instead of potato tots. Are you kidding me? Some people never grow up, and that's why I've always said, some people say men and women, but those are only for mentally and physically grown people. Otherwise, we have grown men, grown boys, and grown girls who are faking as if they were men and women that still don't understand how this thing's supposed to work.
Right. That's so true, what you said. And again, domestic violence is a very tough situation to be in. That is for men and women. So it doesn't matter the gender. You shouldn't be going through it in the first place. When a person begins to emotionally do something to you, psychologically, financially, sexually, physically, that is definitely not a relationship to be in. However, as I mentioned earlier, it's a subtle type of behavior. The person is very cunning. Okay, they can be the sweetest person in the world, and you don't know, because that's how they get you. They have always manipulated many situations in their life. You're just the new person that they're manipulating, and that's all it is, because they never got their own healing from whatever they've been through in their life. Like Stephanie said, that trauma bonding is what kept the two of them together at a young age. So I can only imagine whatever his story was. So I think, again, you guys, when we bring her back again, we can ask her about his background, because we need to understand how the trauma bonding began between the two of them, and to hear get our audience an opportunity to hear that as well, because that can save somebody's life. It really can.
Yeah, Dr. Diamond, just really quickly along those same lines, for folks that are watching, maybe you want to give them a definition of what trauma bonding is, because one of the things I was thinking is that they got married at a very young age. So that's the other thing, is that how much were they emotionally ready for even a relationship at all? Because she said they were married like around 14.
Yes. So let me give you something simple of what trauma bonding means for all of those that are watching and those that will come back later. So trauma bonding can be simply as this. I grew up in an abusive home. John grew up in an abusive home. We have that in common now. Now we are going to connect from this, and not knowing that we already have been exposed to something that has already altered the way we see relationships. So now the two of us, we're together now, and we have quote unquote what it means to be in a relationship, not realizing that we have been traumatized beyond words because we've been exposed to this. We've been exposed to this from early childhood, 4 and 5 years old. So now that's all we know, what trauma looks like, but not knowing or identifying it as trauma. Now, John and I are in a relationship. We connected based on what our backgrounds look like. All of a sudden, I began to verbally start attacking John. You ain't shit. You don't got nothing going on. That's why you this, that, and the other. So now I'm beginning the behaviors that I've been exposed to. So now John on the other side, he would say, you know, although my parents been through some stuff together, they still stayed with it. And I'm going to stay with her, regardless of how I'm being treated. So then he begins to continue to connect with me even more because he's utilizing what came out of his household to stay with me. So trauma bonding is simply what draw the two of you together. And I must add that codependency begins to happen in that type of relationship. So you're going to be codependent on that person's going to be codependent on you. Every move you make will be together instead of a separate mind. So that mind begins to enmesh. It begins to connect to each other in an unhealthy manner. So when you hear Stephanie talk about it, she clearly said we trauma bonded. And that codependency began to happen. So she defined it for you in that way. I wanted to define it in the most simplistic way that you can see it, that is exactly how it happens. And it could be just simple as that. Another example could be a loss of a parent. If I lost my mom and John lost his mom or father at a young age, we bond with that. Okay, we both grieved. But how did we grieve? Who helped us through the grieving process? Who? But getting together, we feel like we're helping each other get through the grieving process because we both identify with grieving. So I hope, Mark, that was a simple way of me explaining trauma bonding. Did that answer your question?
That was a good explanation and
Okay.
everything like that. So that definitely helped get that explanation going. But I wonder with Stephanie, I was wondering how much of that early childhood and not being emotionally prepared for relationships might have been played into some of their situations and everything like that. But what would be interesting, and we didn't get a chance to ask her, is to find out if that was like a family history. Because, you know, like the whole notion, we talked about drawing there with welfare moms, they may have one teenage mom, have another teenage mom, have another teenage mom. So they've been like generation after generation of teenage moms. I don't know whether her mom was a teenage mom, or maybe even her grandma. So at some point, that was the norm. So, if you think about grandparents, they were the norm to have teenager relationships.
That's true. So, you know, when we bring her back on the show, I'll be reaching back out to her and check out her availability and see if she can do the, you know, because usually our shows last between 1.5 hours to 2 hours. I think I'm going to feel out her availability because I do think we need to delve into that so we can have our listeners understand that generational journey. What made her, you know, get to where she was? You're right. What happened? Who schooled her? Who showed her what relationships look like? What does that look like for her? So I do agree with you that we didn't have the opportunity to ask those questions. questions, but I think when we do, like she said, she's an open book. And that is a great thing. That transparency is what's going to be exciting about her next and up and coming interview with us, because she is an open book. And that's very helpful for those that don't know what that looks like. If it is a generational thing, like you said, how do we know that mom wasn't a teen parent and that was accepted by her mom? So that's why she was able to go on with being a very young parent and also delve into marriage and wasn't ready for it yet. So yeah, those are excellent questions that we can ask her on our
We can
next.
ask you that and everything. And like I said on some past shows and everything, you never know what some factors might be. Because even in my own life, as I said before, as far as I'm concerned, my parents had 3 kids. They had me and my younger brother, and that third kid was their business that they started together. And I personally think that might have been part of the reason for their divorcing at a relatively young age, because mom and dad were together for about 20 years, and part of that was them being in business together. Not saying that you can't be business together, because you and Dean are in business together. Y'all are still very successful and generally work well together, but sometimes it can also be a strain on the relationship.
Yes, sometimes it can be a trade-off relationship. And don't get us wrong, John and I, we don't have a lot of arguments or disagreements, but we do know what our backgrounds look like, where we came from with the people that we were with prior. And we had a lot of discussions about that prior. And the thing is, the key is having communication in the beginning, because sometimes you do have to talk about what you've been through so you don't have to go through it again. But thing is, you have to have trust with that person you're talking to, because if that person begins to start showing you signs of throwing back your experience back at you as a weapon, that's a person you don't want to be with. And that will be told early on. So if you get in an argument and that person goes, yeah, that's why this happened to you, that's not the person you want to be with, because you thought you could be vulnerable with that person, but they utilize that as a weapon. So that I really never experienced anything like that. So I can say, thank goodness for that experience was not there. But with no marriage is perfect. You're going to go through your ups and downs. No relationship is perfect, but it's how you work at it every single day, and know that abuse should never be a part of any relationship. And if it creeps in there, you have to know to find your voice and say, this is not for me any longer, and walk away, regardless of what it is. Materials, money, whatever it is, you, the person, is important. That's my say on that one. Anything, Dean, for you?
Let's see.
Thank you.
What you said.
Thank you. Okay, ditto. That would be a ditto. Thank you so much. So, we're saying that, guys, we're getting towards the end of the show here. So what I would like to say is, Dean, thank you for joining us today as, one of our special co-hosts, and you are welcome to come back anytime. I know Toya missed the conversation today. She really wanted to be a part of that, because she even said that, oh man, I'm gonna miss this, but she was missed today. Her voice is missed today on the show. I know that she is also preparing for her butterfly room, and we're going to wish her well on that experience. She did say that she will remain on the couch with us as well. She enjoyed being here with us too. I know Anika had something going on today with her daughter, and she said she was going to try to get on. But again, Dean, thank you for stepping in today and being one of the co-hosts. And Mark, as always, waiting in the wings, always there and ready to go. Always have some great questions too for our guests. So that's a great thing. So before we leave, traditionally, what we do here on the couch, and I know you know this, Dean, what will be your parting words for today for our listeners?
I would say protect your peace at all costs. Be particular with who you deal with, who you allow into your personal space. And then sometimes you have to remove some people who no longer fit in their part of the story of your life. So, Dr. Diamond, and I appreciate you allowing me to invade your space. And like I did for about 10 years, I'm here from NJ to NC with my right-hand man, Mark Lee. We were straight talk with Dean and Mark, and we're back again. So I'll be jumping in, back and forth. But I appreciate y'all, and it's been a good show today.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Mark, your parting words for today.
Great show. It's an amazing show and everything like that. And I would definitely agree with Dean that sometimes you've got to let people go if they're not good for you and everything like that. So sometimes you can't always have everybody in your umbrella that you would like to have in your audience that you've got and everything like that. So sometimes you want to get a lot of people involved, but you can't always get involved. Sometimes you just got to let them go and everything like that. So sometimes that's just the way it is. So definitely, hopefully, we'll be seeing more people getting involved in everything like that. Dean, I do have to teach you. We got to get back to getting to do one of our shows going again, and all along those lines. So we got to get another straight talk with Dean and Mark going and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I did have some sad news that happened in the world of sports that all along those lines. Me and Dean talk about stuff, both politics as well as social justice and a number of other things. I really thought my Bucks were going to do something. I mean, not my Bucks, but my Brewers were going to do something, and they got swept. So I'm a little bit on the sad side because they got totally swept and everything. But
Right.
they do nothing with that guy from Japan. I think he is 3 home runs and 10 strikeouts. But you just can't do anything with people like that. So that pitching staff
always next season, bro.
Rough pitching staff and everything like that. But coming back to domestic violence and all along those lines, sometimes people can even use your hobbies and your interest as a tool and a controlling method. Because I do know sometimes people be like a way that they'll be like, well, you like the Vikings or you like the Cowboys or you like this thing or that. So they won't really have you go to that game because they're afraid that you might be in your role, in your crowd and everything. So they are using it as a control tactic. Or maybe you're a fan of D'Angelo or a fan of the Jackson 5 and they don't want you to go see, say, Janet or something. So sometimes they can use your hobbies as a method to try to cause trouble.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. So listen to that, you all. That is very true. See how subtle that can be? And that is just sports and how that can be utilized against you. So thank you very much, Mark, for sharing that with me. So you guys, I'm going to have you all waiting in the wings in the back, and I'm going to go ahead and talk to our audience here. Thank you all again for joining the couch. But before I go, my parting words is this. Domestic violence is very subtle. It is very harmful to you psychologically, emotionally. It can be very hard on you financially as well. But you have to know when to walk away. Stephanie talked about that a lot. So Stephanie Strickland, again, she is a survivor and a thriver. And she is surviving and she's helping women get to that place in their life as well. What I would say to both Dean Geronimo and Mark Lee, I appreciate them to being also an open book talking about their experiences, and they experience it in a different way. So we got to understand that men also go through domestic violence. And I'd like to thank Dean for going over the signs and the flags of domestic violence so you are more aware of what will happen if you're not paying attention. But if you see the flags early on, get out. Don't stay there because of financial reasons. The children, because if you're thinking that it benefits the children, no, not necessarily. So I would say, remember to love yourself, put yourself first before being in these relationships. Now, Domestic Violence Awareness Month is this month. We have 2 more weeks in this month. Go out. Go find workshops so you can understand what domestic violence is. Also, there are definitely like documentaries you can watch so you can understand what it is, understand the survivor's voice, what that looks like, so you can become more educated and more well-versed out there. Also, if you plan to volunteer, just look for some, volunteering offices that you can go to work with domestic violence survivors. That include the survivors and their children. So remember those things and understand that we all need to step forward and have our voice and use our voice when it's necessary and when we have to. And that can help the ones that their voices are silent. And there are many that their voice became silent due to being a victim of homicide. So I just want you to know those silent voices are the ones that didn't make it out of those domestic violence situations, but we will remember them. So please continue to educate yourself as you move forward. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube. And we thank you so much for joining us and sitting here right here on the couch with us. So once again, we thank you for all that you do, sticking with us and coming back and watching our podcast. Remember to go to your favorite streams so you can hear us later on as well. So we thank you again for joining us on the couch, and you take care, everybody, and we'll see you again in about 2 weeks. So take care and have a good one.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of On the Couch. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and found it as enlightening and inspiring as I did. Remember, the stories and experiences we share here are just the beginning of a much larger journey. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, look for the notification on Facebook, and find us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us keep the conversation going and reach more listeners just like you. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep the dialogue alive. Peace, love, and tranquility. Take care, and we'll see you on the couch.